changed the VC landscape?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's such an interesting and broad question. We could probably talk about it for hours, but yeah, I think there's kind of three interesting things that I think about when it comes to AI, and probably are also really relevant to founders as well. So, first thing is like the nature of the incumbents in the market have changed when you're building a startup. So, in the past, you would build a software business, and one of the things you'd be excited about is that the your competitors, the people who've been in the market for a long time, are slow and they're not nimble, and they've probably made architectural decisions that make it hard for them to change. So maybe they've like got an on-prem strategy, and they may also have a business model that will be cannibalized if they do try and change. So if it's on-prem plus consulting fees, they can't really go cloud native and self-serve. So that's great because as a startup you can build and you're not going to get much of a response from the incumbents in the market. With AI, the incumbents are like tech companies, really well funded, really smart tech companies, full of engineers, not that old, and still, in a lot of cases, have a really good culture. So the chances of you being taken out quite quickly by an incumbent, by them replicating your features and by them leveraging their distribution is kind of scary. So we think a lot about distribution as a key threat, but also a key advantage if you can figure out how to nail it as a startup.
Yeah, no, yeah, super interesting because those tech players now, yeah, you're competing against, like you say, tech native players, but they're also in some ways giving startups quicker exits. We saw Salesforce
Right.
buy Convergence after like 12 months.
Yeah.
They're deep pocketed, highly profitable organizations. Um, could that shorten, like, VC's 7-10 years windows? Could that
Mhm.
shorten that? Do you think you could see quicker exits at still very strong valuations?
I think you could definitely see quicker exits, and like I think you could see um, even bootstrap companies or
Yeah.
solo founder companies, these new types of businesses being built for acquisition by incumbents. The question I've got is that at like 50, 100 million, or is it, a billion plus? And I think most people know the venture business, it's a bit crazy, but like unless you're selling for less than kind of a billion or so, it doesn't really work given that the power law and the venture model. So yes, I think it can. And I think it creates this opportunity for founders to think really creatively actually about how they're going to finance their business and ultimately what they want to build. So that's interesting. But from the venture point of view, it actually makes it a little bit scary.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think there's going to be fewer bigger winners now?
Yeah, I think maybe. I think the bigger winners are getting bigger, which is interesting,
Yeah.
right? So if you think about the last, whatever, 5 years or so, got to check my timings, but like if you think about OpenAI, I mean, that is a big winner. And let's not forget, it's not a particularly old company. And you've got the CTO who spun out and just raised 2 on 10, which in the old days would have been 2 million at 10 million.
Yeah.
Now it's 2 billion at 10 billion. So there were going to be very, very, very big winners, but probably a smaller number. I think what's less clear is in the sort of 1 to 10 billion exit range, what does that actually look like? Are the incumbents still so strong they can take people out early and there's less space to build? That's an open question. I don't know the answer to that, but it's something that we're looking at pretty closely.
And how has it changed the way that you're looking at opportunities? I know that Playfair talks
Yeah.
about trying to find underserved or unhyped verticals or companies. We're in like one of the biggest hype moments of technology, right?
Yeah.
There's everyone's trying to build an AI company. Valuations, like you said, the 2 on 10 billion is crazy. We're
Yeah.
seeing a lot of very, very hot rounds. How are you looking for underserved or unhyped companies in this hype bubble at the moment?
A couple of things I think. So one is we're looking for companies that if you take AI out of the deck, just like literally cross it out, is it still a super interesting business, right? Are the founders solving a real problem? Do the customers want to buy it? And that bit's critical because there is a gap between what people are saying online, which is that everyone's using AI, it's going to change the world in the next, urgently, and actually what most of the world outside, let's say, coding, customer service, and maybe sales, how they're actually using AI. Like an enterprise, I think most people in enterprise, AI is it's an aspiration. It's not something that they're actually deploying at scale yet. And I think that might take a little bit longer. So we look for companies that have got that piece figured out, have figured out distribution, have figured out customers that actually want to buy their product and they can deliver their product. More broadly, hardware. We've invested in a couple of robotics businesses. Things that are a little bit actually harder to build and harder to do. And then regulated markets have got super interesting. So actually, the last two investments we've made, I mean, they're both in stealth. I can't talk too much about them, but they both require regulatory approval. And I think in the old days we'd have gone, oh, lots of money and time and effort and risk. Now the view is, well, that creates defensibility and it
Yeah.
creates credibility with buyers because you've gone through this process. So we are looking for actually things that are just harder to do and the founders that are up for trying to do it.
Yeah, it's interesting. As technology becomes more commoditized, AI breaks down that sort of technological moat. You're looking for other moats, and you're saying, getting regulated could be one of them. Yeah, that's really interesting because I guess even regulation is still going to take a long time to get done.
Exactly. And look, I think the other thing is I think people are maybe pricing risk in the long term incorrectly. So if you look at an AI company that is doing something that we would view as like a lot of other companies are doing, so I'll take sales again, sales pipeline optimization. We've seen like 50 companies doing that, and they're all growing quite nicely. People are getting comfort from that initial ARR growth. I think what they're failing to see is where is that company going to be in 10 years, and they think that there's not much risk in the bet. We think there is because actually in 2-3 years, a bunch of those companies won't exist anymore, or they will be low value exits. So our view is actually, if you look at regulated industries, that creates a bit of a moat, and in 10 years, we can see where that company can go.
Yeah, interesting. So is that going to become an increasing focus, you think, for Playfair? Those companies with bigger moats, whether it's hardware, deep tech, regulated industries, do you think that's where there's like great opportunities for VCs in this new world?
Yeah, for sure. I think there are loads of opportunities there. I mean, I think there are opportunities in companies utilizing AI. I think it's just you need to have a sort of real company of substance underneath it. So, and we've been investing in AI for a long time. So actually,
Yeah.
if you look at companies like Orca AI in the shipping space, I mean, that's kind of applied AI, recycleize, applying AI to waste management. So we've been investing for a long time. We just want companies of substance, I guess, is what we're interested in.
Yeah, interesting. I think you also invested in Stack One, is that right?
Right.
That was a recent one. That's AI focused. They raised a big 20 million Series A by Google Ventures.
Right.
What excited you about them specifically?
So I think in this new world where you can build software far more quickly, obviously it's like the Lovable, Story, Cursor, etc., there are still really critical bottlenecks, and the critical bottleneck Stack One solves is integration with other software platforms and other software solutions, and so that actually is an enormous market. If you can unblock that, you can fulfill the potential effectively of using AI for code creation and building software. So we felt they were just like a core part of the stack you need to fulfill the potential that we see in the broader sort of technology trend.
Yeah, that was a really, really interesting, exciting round. Yeah, it definitely feels like there's an opportunity to build the tools that take AI to the next level, not just pure AI players, but connecting the dots and yeah, taking it forward.
Exactly, and on that, right, I think the team as well. They're like, I mean, they've got the traditional sort of AI API integration piece, and then they've got the agentic AI integration piece. So whatever stage of the journey you're on as a company, they can fulfill that need. So I think that's a smart strategy from Romain and Guillaume as well.
Yeah, so that ticked your box of taking AI out of the equation. Still a cool company, still an amazing team.
Solving real problem, right? That a lot of companies have. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. I also want to talk about Playfair as a firm. I read the Midas Touch. Is it the Midas Touch? Is that
Yeah, it's the Midas touch. Yeah,
yeah.
by the way, we don't know who they are. It's so interesting. Like they're completely anonymous, but thank you for writing a nice
Yeah,
piece.
I wanted to ask about it because I read their piece. I think they did a piece on Seed Camp as well.
Yeah,
How did you do that then? If you don't know who they are, did they just reach out? Is it like an anonymous email address?
I've never spoken to them. I don't know who they are. They have emailed me subsequently to say thank you for sharing it on socials. We like appreciate it. And it's an anonymous Gmail address.
Oh, so
So
that
I don't
you
know.
didn't write it with them. They're doing it.
No?
Oh, really interesting. Oh, wow, cool. No, it was amazing for me. I did so much of the research that I would have needed to have done was in that piece. But I mean, I read the piece. I've spoken to other people who you've either invested in or who know of you and Playfair. Playfair has this real good actor reputation. Like some VCs
Yeah.
do, some VCs do. I think that's clearly something that you care about. I saw that you recently shared your term sheet. Can you
Yeah.
talk about why you did that and why you think that's important?
Yeah. I think first of all, I think like any industry, there are sort of good actors, medium and bad. And actually there probably aren't that many bad, but they're enough,
Mm,
to the founders get caught. And I think the main driver behind sharing it is that we actually back a lot of first time founders. So not necessarily first time building a company, but probably first time raising
yeah,
venture. I think it's like at least 80% in the last two funds.
yeah. Wow.
And so for us, we're like, actually, we can be really helpful to those founders by sharing the term sheet. It actually helps us a little bit because when they come and talk to us about it, they're also prepared.
Yeah,
And it felt like just a sensible thing to do for the ecosystem. I mean, we've got a lot of standardization. The BBC have been helpful here. That actually, things like prefs, it's all well set. And so, yeah, we just thought it was going to be helpful for founders and helpful for us to streamline the process when we get to issue a term sheet.
yeah. Really nice. No, I had a look. It's amazing. And have you seen any other VCs follow your lead?
We definitely weren't the first, by the way. So
Yeah.
I think, Passion did it a
Oh,
little
did they?
while
Okay.
ago, maybe Hummingbird, and maybe like one or two others. I mean, not a huge number, but no one had done it recently. So I think we just felt that lots of things have changed. The BBCA releases updated templates, updated recommendations. So we're like, well, ours is kind of aligned to that. So let's get it out there.
Yeah. Okay. Um, Going back to the high percentage of first time
Mm,
founders that Playfair backs, backing repeat founders is something that people always talk about because they say you have a higher chance of success.
yeah.
When you're looking at first time founders, what are you really looking for that you think makes them stand out?
Yeah. I posted about this. So we have 9 founder traits
Hmm.
that we think are important, which I'm not going to try and remember because I'll definitely miss a couple out. But there's a LinkedIn post I did recently about it. Um, but it is to do with unique commercial insights, kind of domain obsession, motivations. It's just like a whole matrix of things that we look for. And I think actually with first time founders, what's critical is it doesn't have to have come from building something in tech before.
Yeah.
So, we have like George Richardson at Aerocloud, who was a professional racing driver, podiumed at Le Mans, used to race for Ferrari. We're like, well, you're probably pretty committed and used to operating under
Yeah.
pressure. And then Talman from Astral. I'm going to get it wrong. He's a martial. He's a gold martial artist at an international competition. I can't remember. I think it might be Taekwondo, but if I get the wrong one, he'll probably come and beat me. So, but like we've just got these founders who demonstrate this incredible. It's like proactivity, energy, and success in other fields that then we think if they apply it to entrepreneurship and being founders makes sense.
And
Yeah.
as to how rigorous are you in assessing those founders by those kind of criteria? Is that like a real process you go through where you sort of like score or rank them, or is it more sort of like generalist and you're kind of you're sort of like testing them but loosely?
I think we spend a lot of time with them is probably
Yeah.
the main thing. So, and also it's really important. The entire team meets the founders in our office normally when it's not COVID times, and then maybe over lunch or dinner or whatever it is, and spends time with them. We want to know about their backgrounds, their families. We talk about where we grew up. We really get into the story of who they are. I think that's super important. And then obviously we triangulate the feedback of the entire, actually not just the investment team, like we've had a founder who came into the office and was a bit rude. And our receptionist at the time made a comment, and we're like, okay, that's a really valid data point for us. So the whole team is basically taking a view on the team.
Really interesting. And talking about your team, it seems like Playfair has a real culture of hiring fairly junior, letting people grow and rise through the firm. I want to ask two questions on that. Firstly, have you
Mm-hmm.
got any advice to anybody looking to break into a relatively junior role in VC? And then
Yep.
secondly, I'd like to hear about how junior VCs can succeed in a firm like Playfair and rise through the ranks.
Yeah, you're right. So we decided that we want to protect the culture that Fede originally started, 13, 14 years ago now, and hire junior people, train them, I was going to say indoctrinate, not the right word, but like get people to really understand what
Yeah,
Playfair values mean and how we act in all different situations, whether it's to do with doing deals or on boards or whatever. So my advice, I think the best interviews I've ever had have been with people who have already invested in companies. And the barriers used to be super high. Like back in the day, I was in angel investing. It was like 25K checks. Now you can do it for like a few £100 or maybe whatever on crowdfunding sites. The reason it's important is because it totally changes the nature of that interview. We're not talking about what you did at your investment bank or your consulting firm. We're talking about
Yeah.
companies you've identified, why you like them, and why you invested. And I'll never forget the interview with Henrik, which was only a few months after I joined Playfair. But he's like, "Oh, I invested in Monzo," and my former partner Joe was like, "Ah, we passed on that. Damn. So you must be a better investor than we are."
Yeah, it's
It
amazing.
creates interesting conversations. So start investing. Absolutely start investing. And I think the other thing is it's hard to get into venture. It can take time. So if it's not happening for you immediately, do things that make you more attractive to funds. Go and work in startups, go and do something interesting. As long as you're acquiring skills and experience and knowledge that's going to be useful in venture later on, you can also enter any time. Right? I joined as a partner. So just keep building your knowledge and relevant experience.
Yeah, I think venture is one of the few jobs that you can actually do by yourself. Like you said, you can
Right.
invest. Even if you don't want to invest or you don't have the capital, you can still find cool companies and send them to
Yeah.
VCs. You can still build the network with founders, go to events. It's one of those few jobs that you can really do on your own,
Yeah.
or at least like play the role of it. And then secondly, yeah, what advice would you give to young VCs who are in analyst associate roles? What can they do to really stand out and shine and hopefully rise all the way to partner?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there's some like really fundamental things like show up on time and be responsive and like basic like office and work hygiene
Yeah.
stuff, which it kind of surprises me that some people just don't have. To get that right, just get that nailed. I think actually thinking from day one about whether you would lead the deal or not, because there is a big step change between so Playfair associates lead deals. I
Oh,
think it's
amazing.
maybe earlier than other funds, but
Yeah.
between analyst and associate, you've gone from as an analyst effectively like servicing the rest of the team, helping with bits of investment memos and taking calls and doing that, to suddenly being an associate where you basically go out and find companies and you can lead an investment and take a board seat. And it's quite a big switch from being reactive to proactive, from being somebody who's doing something for someone else to leading a deal. So if you can have in your mind, would I lead this deal or not? And have good reasons for it. It's about training your pattern recognition,
Yeah.
training how you build conviction from the early days. You'll find the transition much, much easier when it comes to actually writing checks yourself.
Yeah, amazing. Okay. No, that's super, super helpful. I know that's something that people are always talking about. I go to a lot of events with young people who are
Hmm.
desperate to break into the industry. I'm conscious we've only got a few minutes left, but I've got a few
Yeah,
more questions.
sure.
I want to talk about like VC value add.
Yeah,
I think you've said in the past that capital has become commoditized,
yes.
and so in a capital commoditized world, how can VCs and how does Playfair still add value outside of just capital?
Yeah. So I think we do a few things. I think the first one is fundraising, which sounds like the most obvious thing in the world. But actually, in our experience, a lot of funds say, "Yeah, we'll help you with the next round," and they'll make one or two intros, and that's kind of it. We will help from narrative and deck creation, investor list generation, running that whole process, making intros. I think with the recent round, we made about 75 introductions,
Wow.
um, back channeling with investors, doing pitch practice, the whole thing. And it should be something every fund does. Most don't have the capacity, right? So our setup means that we do have time. So fundraising, absolutely key because our job is to get founders from pre-seed to Series A. Right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point. So that's key. I think one thing I mentioned, which is actually quite new, so we hired a CFO, a guy called Matt, and we've actually found that we don't have a platform team. The team already has the knowledge of sales, go to market, myself and Chef, marketing, engineering, sort of Felix, and then sort of finance and modeling, Henrik, and then we all basically have enough knowledge there, or we know the people to sort of connect you to in our network if we don't. But Matt, as CFO, has come in and he helps founders set things up right from the beginning from a financial
Mm,
point of view, which is really important because most founders don't have the mental capacity, the time, or the resource to have like a fractional CFO from day one.
yeah.
Well, we've got one, and he'll help you out.
Mm,
So you get the foundations in place correctly, and then when it comes to the next round of funding, particularly the step between pre-seed and A, things like helping build your model, helping refine the model, stress test, like asking you a bunch of difficult questions. He does that as well. So we found that to be incredibly, incredibly helpful over the last sort of 6, 7 months that Matt's been with us.
No, that's amazing. That's really hands on, especially on the fundraising. I think that probably ties. I know that Playfair do a lot of like follow on as well.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Two final questions. The first one, we've got Johnny from Yasso on.
Yeah.
Anything you think we should ask him?
um, Ask him what he thinks about Donald Trump and the impact it's had on his business.
Interesting.
Yeah, I think that would be the right thing to ask.
That's definitely on our list.
Okay.
And final question, what do you think European tech needs to take it to the next level?
Yeah, I watched James on the show recently, and I thought his like what's happened in these 5 year chunks, and actually we're doing all right, thanks, was a
Yeah.
really good take on things. What do we need next? I mean, I think in the UK, um, we need a government actually, and I don't want to get too political, but we need a government who says business growth is a priority and actually follows that with actions. So it is a bit about tax. It's a bit about stability. Yeah, all that stuff would be extremely helpful. I don't think we need a lot of help. We just need stability and people to get out of the way. So remove the uncertainty and remove the friction because the UK is still a great place to build. And then I think in Europe, bureaucracy just got to go. I
Yeah.
mean, we have investments in Germany, and it's like, sure, let's go to the notary office and spend, half our life there, or let's get a visa for someone to get a role at 6 months. I mean, that's just simplification of regulations. I think would help enormously.
Yeah. Okay. That sounds good. Amazing. So Chris, I'm going to stop recording. Thank you so much for joining us. If I can ask if you could just like stick around for 30 seconds, just because
Of
sometimes
course.
the recording takes